let's talk about minimum wage and what it actually exists for, why it exists. Because when the topic comes up, a lot of times there's this argument that goes something along the lines of, minimum wage was never really meant to be a living wage, or, minimum wage jobs are just meant for teenagers or high schoolers or whatever that don't need to sustain themselves. Which right off the bat already makes very little sense, because if the minimum wage is meant for people who don't really need the money and don't actually have to sustain or support themselves, then what is the functional point of the minimum wage in the first place? At that point, there doesn't even really need to be a minimum. I mean, there's already things like unpaid internships, which is a scam, by the way, doing unpaid labor for a company, even if it's to get job experience or whatever, but I digress. The minimum wage came about in the wake of the Great Depression, which put every person who worked for a living in pretty dire economic straits. And you ended up in this sort of situation where nobody really even wanted to work after a while, because you had your choice. You could not work and be impoverished, or you can work and bust your butt for the company, for the big man to make a profit, and still be impoverished. If that situation sounds familiar, that's because it is, and that should ring some alarm bells as to where we're at right now. But in the throes of it all, during the Great Depression, there was eventually this consensus reached in the halls of government as things started to fall apart and industry was kind of grinding to a halt and work wasn't getting done, was that there would have to be some sort of minimum standard of pay, so that there was essentially a societal guarantee, right? That if you put your labor in, if you contribute to the economy, if you work full time, you will not be impoverished. And it behooved both the worker and, the government and the powers that be, because it by setting that floor, it ensured that people would actually keep the economic engine moving. They wouldn't just stop participating out of disillusion. So, yeah, the minimum wage was actually, at the time, purpose made so that people working a full-time job could make a living. It wasn't just meant to be some minimum standard job for kids in high school. It didn't harm the economy then, in a much more vulnerable state than it is even now, and if in fact it along with many other policies actually helped. It didn't. It's not some raising the minimum wage is not something that would crush small business. If anything, it would be beneficial in the long term, because the average person, the actual customer base for small business, would actually have enough disposable income to engage with small business. This idea that the minimum wage is not and never was supposed to be a living wage is basically just an age-old corporate talking point that worked its way into the public conversation. Mostly just meant to get people in the working class to work against each other's interests and look down on each other. Hey everyone, if you like what you see and I think I talk about the right issues, my name's Max Diaz. I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives, South Carolina, District 1. If you want to keep track of me and see what I'm up to and keep track of the campaign, please, by all means, follow me on my social media accounts. I post updates there, and I post when I'm hosting events. If you want to just find out about a little more about me and about the campaign, please visit my website. That's probably the best resource at maxdiazforcongress.com. If you have any questions, you can always contact me on the contact methods I have on the website. Make sure you're civically engaged. Always go out and vote. Keep track of your local elections and candidates. The best way to get a government that works for the people is to be involved from the bottom all the way up in the political process. That's really the important thing to do. Now, until next time, I wish you all the best.